Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice Hughes. Over the next hour, you'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast of Internet Safety. I'm your host, Donna Rice Hughes. We've got a really good and very interesting show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and child exploitation and prosecution, what's going on out there in the world of law enforcement, and how to protect your kids. We have a very special guest with us, very impressive actually. John Pizzuro serves as Raven's CEO. Before that, he spent 25 years in the New Jersey State Police, the last 6 years being spent as the commander of the New Jersey ICAC Task Force. ICAC stands for Internet Crimes Against Children. They arrested over 1,500 people when he was running that task force. John has trained thousands of investigators on how to investigate child exploitation. He served as the chairman of the ICAC Outreach Committee. He's helped other nations investigate online crimes against children through ICMIC. There's another one. We just have all these acronyms. ICMIC is the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He's been a featured guest on Good Morning America, C-SPAN, and he's been quoted in USA Today, the New York Times, and he just recently worked with 60 Minutes on a piece. And I want to hear about that, John, if you can talk about it. He's also a certified master neuro-linguistic practitioner. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me, Donna.
Okay, so John, first of all, what is a master neuro-linguistic practitioner? I don't think I've heard that title before.
Well, it's NLP. It's basically how language really impacts in patterns and behavior. So kind of what the words we do, and that's why when we talk about grooming,
yes,
that's why children get groomed. It's because of the words they hear if you speak their language. So it has to do a lot about words and language and how our brain patterns work. So that's how, yeah.
Well, that makes so much sense, and why you're so great at what you do. One of the many reasons why you're so great at what you do. I want to come back to, you left law enforcement 2 years ago and you started Raven. Why?
Well, here's the simple aspect is that we would complain about things not being done. You know, I remember John Matson, I had this conversation as the board president of Raven. If not us, who? If not now, when? Basically, we're the people that are on the front door dealing with everything on a daily basis. And unfortunately, there's a disconnect from even the best well-intended groups out there, is that what happens legislatively to how it's actually enacted is a complete difference. So that's why Raven was created.
Well, thank you for that. And tell our listeners what Raven does, because you truly are unique. You're focused on the law enforcement investigation side of this, so you can help people who are writing legislation figure out what's really going to work once it goes from paper to practice, right?
Yeah. So one of the things is, and this is how it came to fruition, the name Raven, is in Nordic myth, Odin had two ravens, memory and foresight. So it's the people of the past helping the people of the future. You know, that's where our name really comes from. But the reality is that today, why it's so challenging is that we are a lobbying firm. So a lot of times during law enforcement, we weren't allowed to talk openly about anything. We were always told that we had to curtail it, that we had enough people, we had enough resources. People didn't want us talking about that. But in retirement, we're allowed to actually go out and lobby. So what differentiates us from other organizations is we are 100% 501 nonprofit C4, which allows us to lobby full time. And if that means calling political people out for not actually doing what they need to do, we can do that. That means attending elected members' events, but it's really in order to change things, because we did prevention, we did investigation, and you always hear the adage, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. You hear the adage, you know, we need more prevention. But in our experience, we found is what we need is legislation and regulation. It's the only thing that's going to matter and ultimately change things. So that's why Raven was created.
I so agree with you, and that's why at Enough is Enough, we've got three major prongs. One is education, educating the public, educating everyone about what the dangers are and how to protect kids, especially parents, as the first line of defense. The second piece is the corporate responsibility and accountability piece. And as you know, John, we've been trying for the 30 years I've been doing this, and you've been doing it as long, to try to get big tech companies to voluntarily do what we really need them to do that will make a difference is hard. They move slow and they're very stubborn. But once you get the stick of the law involved, things start moving much more quickly. And then, of course, you've got the government making those laws, getting those laws funded, which we're going to talk about a little later on, and developing new laws. But I want you, as a law enforcement guy, explain to our listeners what crimes constitute online child exploitation, because there's a lot of them.
You can go from enticement, for example, so where the grooming aspect comes from. You have possession of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. You have distribution of it, which people actually trade that. You have the online sexual assault of children, where you actually have children perform sex acts where they do that on camera. So, and you also have the actual purchasing of children for sex across borders. So you have the sex trafficking aspect of children. So you have all that in between. And now, more than anything, you have sextortion, where people are using these images and videos of children for financial gain in order to facilitate their own financial interests.
Right. And sextortion, as you know, has been called one of the fastest growing crimes against children. Males are very much being targeted there. And all of these are a global pandemic. Just real quickly, run through some numbers, and then we're going to get right to AI and how AI is exponentially exacerbating this whole problem.
So I'm going to give you a couple numbers that'll really blow your mind, right? Everyone knows that there's 36 million cyber tips worldwide, and those are just tips that come into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which then they have to parse out and then send to either law enforcement, domestic, and abroad. But out of that 36 million, only 257 came from Apple. Apple has a 59.8% market share in the United States. So that's only just to show you the scale. Currently, right now in the United States, there's over 100,000 IP addresses where are sharing known images and videos of infant and toddlers being raped and sexually abused, and only 628 are being investigated out of that 100,000. And that's because of the lack of resources. So when we talk about numbers, the scale is so big, but it's just one of those subjects that people do not want to talk about. And that's what makes it so challenging.
You're so right. When when we talk about the fact that children as young as toddlers and infants are being raped and abused, videotaped, even live streamed in real time, that this is happening and it's a global pandemic, people are shocked. But this has been going on for a long time, just that the numbers have gotten worse and worse and worse. Do you think that a lot of this is because of the funding and the resources, or is there more to it? And this is a two-for question, John, before I forget, okay? The Apple situation. Apple's reporting very few CSAM reports on child exploitation. And why is that? So you take whichever one you want first.
So I'll take that one first. So for example, Apple moves to like end-to-end encryption. What they want to do is they are a big privacy expert. So, there's a move where people don't want their system scanned or their information scanned for these type of known videos and images. So they go to the privacy route, where in their environment, in their encrypted environment, no one knows what's going on. So that's part of the reason that they don't report. Now, it's one of those things too with Section 230. If I don't know there's an issue and I don't know that there's a problem, I can't be liable for it. So for companies, it's better business not to know that the problem is happening on their platforms, because if they do know about it, then it opens them up to liability. So that's where that really comes into. And if I am a criminal, an offender, I'm going to look for different platforms that will actually hide and help me be anonymous that someone's not looking at. So I'll add another point to that. There is no age identification for apps. There's no
Right.
identity verification. People can be whoever they want to be. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, it actually helps the offender. And all you have to do is right now, I think there was a couple news articles on Roblox, but every one of these platforms allow for the content to be actually traded. But again, if they don't know about it and they're
Right.
not looking at it, then they can't be liable. So it's kind of the tree in the forest thing. If it crashed in the forest, did it really fall, you know?
Right, right. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and we hear a lot about the perception, and it's true to a large degree that a lot of this criminal content, in this case for our listeners, we're talking about child pornography, which we've now renamed as child sex abuse material. So when you hear us talking about child sex abuse material, which we say CSAM for short, now you know what we're talking about. But that a lot of that is on the deep web, in the dark web, and it is. But with these Apple, for instance, who's encrypting this content, a predator and an offender, they don't even really have to, they can use Apple instead. Is that right?
Yeah. So let's say this. Let's say I put you on um, Apple, right? And we're doing an
Mm-hmm.
iMessage back and forth, and it's encrypted. It means you're encrypted and I'm encrypted. If you are sending me images and videos, the platforms do not know about it. So that end-to-end encryption, what it does is protect it. Now, we can get into this a little bit later when we talk about laws, but should a child have the right of privacy or 8 or 9? Because if you unencrypt one of the children's platforms, and
Right.
then the adult isn't encrypted as well. So that's what we're trying to do ultimately, is that if you can get to a child into an encrypted environment, no one is going to know what's happening to that child. And law enforcement is going to have no way of getting the records, finding out the offender, finding who's victimized. And there's never one victim, Donna. I mean,
Yeah, right.
so I think that's part of the challenge.
And like you said, there's never one victim. I was at a memorial service 2 days ago, and a gal's husband just got out of law school, and he's taking on this issue, and he is defending a guy, and they found, I don't know, 400 or 500 images, and this isn't unusual, of CSAM on his computer. These pedophiles and offenders, they collect this content, don't they? It's and then they trade it and they barter back and forth. John, you and I have talked about this power of virtual validation, where predators get together online, they teach each other how to avoid law enforcement, how to groom children, they trade these images back and forth to get new images, et cetera, et cetera. So just speak to that for just a minute. Then I want you to go back to some of the stats.
All right, so I'm going to go like an offender mindset, right? So we were
Okay.
undercover in the pedo support community. Believe it or not, there's a support community for offenders, and there's about 20 of them on the dark net. And what they talk about is techniques. How we do a podcast, they're doing podcasts on how to actually offend.
Hmm.
So that is where that behavior comes from. Basically, there's posts on there, Donna, where how to groom a 4-year-old,
Hmm.
um, thoughts of oral sex with a 0 to 2-year-olds.
Right.
So when you're talking about that, they're going to, even though they're there where they could talk about it, they're going to get into an environment. Their whole goal is to get to a child and get them off of one platform into another platform that they can control, as well as escape any being detected at all.
Right. So let's talk about now. We've talked about how big this was, or is currently, and it's exploded exponentially, right? Just over the past few years, it's just record highs of reports, being turned into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Too few of those reports are actually getting investigated and prosecuted. Now there's AI. So describe to our listeners, what is AI and how is this basically causing more and more issues with this whole issue of online child
So I'll
exploitation.
give you an example. So Samuel Schwinger, a person we arrested, this is in 2019. What they did is they groomed a 9-year-old girl. The 9-year-old girl then gave Samuel Schwinger a video, sexually abused video, just explicit. And then that person pretended to be that 9-year-old, and over 3 months was able to get 67 victims to basically do that on camera. With AI, he doesn't need to actually get that 9-year-old to do it. He can make up his own 9-year-old. He can take another child. So what it gives the ability is to manipulate anyone's photo and create series. So for example, you could turn down the clock and you can make me like 4 or 6 or whatever the age is.
Right.
So that's where AI is going to start, and that's where they're going to use it. So that's point one. Point two is for the children in school. Now with these video apps, I can just actually take a photo of children. Let's say I'm 13. I can take a photo of a boy, take a photo of a 13-year-old girl. I say the 13-year-old girl sent this to me, and now I send it throughout the school. The 13-year-old never sent an image, but now according with AI, I can actually do that.
Wow. This is so crazy. So let's talk about AI generated child pornography. Just describe for our listeners what that is and how this is being done.
So basically all you're doing is that you're taking an image. So for example, is that I can create my own person who's not off a victim. And then secondly, I can take a picture of a victim and then create a series. So basically what the AI will allow me to do is actually change the whole video components. Like you even see some of these videos, like take a look at Marvel movies where they de-age or age someone nowadays.
Right.
Think about that on a scale of AI where we can do that. So that's what's happening from an AI image. And now I can create a series.
So, but you don't even need an AI image, do you? So, for instance, let's just say proud grandma post a picture of her 2-year-old
Yep.
online. Okay, so now a predator, an offender, can take that innocent, sweet image and do what with it?
I can make a whole series with that image. So in other words, I could take the 2-year-old, make that 2-year-old not only nudify, which is a term that's going on, just completely make it naked, and then actually have that 2-year-old perform actually sex actions and create a series on it based upon that AI.
Right. And it's the image of the real child, the face.
Yes.
But this child was never engaged in child sexual abuse material, but it looks like that this is what happened to the child. And so how difficult now is this for law enforcement to detect what is computer generated child I'm just going to call it child pornography for listeners, or an actual child that was sexually abused and is out there somewhere needing to be rescued?
That's going to be the biggest challenge because people might be, it's hard. There's a couple programs out there that can helpfully delineate what's AI and what's not. There's a way of watermarking some pictures and some photos that aren't, but it's going to be, especially when it starts, we don't have the tools, technology, and training to determine what is AI and what isn't. And I think that's going to be the really pain point for law enforcement right now. And we might be actually chasing images and videos that, in fact, there's not a victim. There's a victim of it, but we don't know if that victim's being abused, right? So now, if we're doing that, we're taking away time from the children that do need to be rescued, right? So it's going to be hard to determine, from a law enforcement perspective.
Exactly. So I guess since we don't know a whole lot about what's out there, do you have any idea how much of the CSAM that's out there is actually computer generated or through AI?
Right now, there's not a lot. It's just starting every day. There's more and more and more. What you're doing is you're creating an infinite source of child sexual abuse material. That's what AI is going to do, is that there's going to be so much of it that, look, the reality is that I can have whatever I want. And now when we talk about even from relationships to like, I think there are like 52 apps right now. You can have your own AI girlfriend that will talk to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more technology advances, the more realistic is that. And Donna, I'm not talking about like, this isn't like 5 years away. This is like months to like a year away from being perfected so much that it's almost going to be impossible.
It really is scary. We're going to talk about what the benefits might be of AI, even though the downside to me is just hardly worth it. But we'll get to that, after the break. But this is from your Raven site, and I think you covered some of this, but I found this really interesting. You said every IP address, all right, and by the way, anything online has its own IP address, seeing, trading child pornography, just for the sake of our listeners, is a beacon of light leading directly to the doorstep of a child waiting for rescue. Speak to that.
So there's this study called that was Dr. Michael Burke did it, years ago, called the Butner study. And in that study, he found those IP addresses and those peer-to-peer, found that 50 to 85% of those individuals were hands-on offenders.
Hmm.
So with 8 to 13 victims each. So when I mentioned the 100,000 IP addresses that I was talking about, there is probably 500,000 victims right now in the US. So when we talk about
Mm.
that offender and that child, it's proven that they will offend hands-on. And that's what we mean about actually rescuing those children.
Right. And one of the other things, just for our listeners, we know that with those who have a sexual appetite for children, which are pedophiles and hebephiles and traffickers, that will then sell these children for sex to someone who does have a sexual appetite for children. They oftentimes get hooked on or addicted to this content itself, but it doesn't satisfy their desire, does it? Instead, it fuels their desire to actually act out on a real child, correct?
Correct. So like, it's the fantasy aspect of things. For example, is that what you fantasize about and what you think about, you are going to continually try to fill that need. And the silly argument, and there's this argument from some people out there, which is one of the most asinine things I've ever heard of, is where, and I'm speaking bluntly, is that like child sex dolls, let's give offenders child sex dolls, let's give them fake content. All you're
No.
doing is fueling that desire because you're giving them the appetite until they reach the real child. And ultimately, it's risk versus reward. Until that's outweighed, when that reward outweighs the risk, Dr. Joe Sullivan does this risk, this spiral of risk. Eventually, it's watered down enough to an offender where they're going to act. So
Right.
all you're doing is fueling that desire. And look, you know what? What we think about, what we want, is what we're trying to make happen, and that's what an offender does.
Like we were talking about in the virtual validation of how these predators get together who all share the same desire for children. They can get together in certain kinds of groups too. So let's just say some of them like, kids under 2. Some of them like, 11 to 12-year-old Oriental girls, or so they can just get together and they fuel each other and actually encourage each other to act out on these appetites as well.
Well, yeah. So, like when I mentioned the tour aspect before,
Hmm.
like a dating profile. Instead, they have what their age preferences. We see
Right.
6 to 14-year-old girls, 5 to 9-year-old boys. And one of the things that you touched on in the beginning, there is many boys as being abused as girls. The problem
Right.
is that boys report, I think it's 1 out of 9. Girls
Right.
might report 1 out of 6. So the reality is that yeah, the scope of the problem isn't, a lot of people don't talk about it as much, is because it's not being reported on.
You're so right. Last week, I interviewed a friend of mine, Michael Reagan, the oldest son of Ronald Reagan, and he was sexually abused as a child. He told his whole story, but we did talk about that aspect of the male being the one who's sexually exploited, and then the images are taken. And the shame factor, I mean, it's shameful enough for a girl, but just the added shame factor for a boy, and why they don't tell, and why they don't talk about it, and why they don't report. And he really just did an excellent job in talking about that. So you're right, we really don't know how big this is. And before we go to break, I just want to make a point and have you comment on this. A lot of people that I talk to think that all of this is happening somewhere else, in other places, overseas. And I go, no, it's just like trafficking. It's happening in your own backyard. Any place a child is playing, a predator can be preying. You don't know if your next door neighbor, the guy across the street, Uncle Sam over here, is actually using CSAM and even acting out on a child, correct?
Correct. I mean, all you have to do is look at Roblox. Like my girlfriend's daughter's friend just got attemptedly groomed with someone there. I guarantee you, it's one of these things where you will know someone. It might be your neighbor, it might be your friend, but I guarantee it's happening to someone you know.
That's right. And the United States is still one of the top hosts of this kind of material in the United States of America. It's not Taiwan, or not Taiwan.
We are the biggest
Thailand.
consumer.
We're the biggest consumer, but we're also hosting a lot of this content, right, through VeriSign.
Yeah, right here in the U.S. soil.
Right, I know, and actually
Yep.
right down the street from my home in Northern Virginia. So everyone, I know this is a lot to digest. We're speaking with John Pizzuro, and we're going to come back right after the break, and we're going to talk about some good news, how to protect your kids from online exploitation, what every parent needs to know about AI, and what the government is doing to deal with this. So thanks so much, and we'll see you after the break. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Internet Safety. I'm your host, Donna Rice Hughes, and we are having a fascinating and, yes, scary conversation with John Pizzuro. He is the CEO of Raven. He is former law enforcement, and let me tell you, he's tough. He knows what he's doing, and he knows what needs to happen to be able to get these offenders prosecuted, to help Congress write laws that have teeth, that will actually work in the field. And that's not so easy. So John, let's talk about, what is Congress doing? What laws are on the books now, and what do you see coming down the pipe?
All right, so we finally passed one law which basically would allow for the electronic submission for children and victims to submit stuff electronically. Believe it or not, there wasn't a bill or a law that allowed companies and people to report things electronically, but more importantly, it forced the tech companies to hold records for at least a year in order for law enforcement to get to it. So that's a good thing. But outside of that, there are so many different bills, from the Kids Online Safety Act to SHIELD and some of these other bills. Challenge is now everyone has a bill and wants to do anything, but most of the bills, how do you put it, don't do enough, or you
Right.
have opposition.
Mhm.
So I'll say this, Donna. The good thing is that people are focused on it.
Yes.
The challenging thing is trying to get something actually done. And I think that's where we are right now.
And you're so right. We also at Enough is Enough work on these laws as well, not so much from writing them, but to advocating for them and to talking about them and to getting them actually passed. And one of the things that I find really positive is that this is a nonpartisan issue that has wide bipartisan support at the Senate and the House of Representatives and also across the states. That's a good thing, because preventing the online exploitation of children is something we all care about. It doesn't matter what color you are, your race, your age, your political persuasion, none of that matters. This is a global pandemic, John. You and I both know this, and we're throwing peanuts at it in terms of dollars. There simply isn't enough money to even prosecute the laws we have on the books, right? You were talking about all these unprosecuted cases, all these hundreds of thousands of kids, and there's images out there, and you've only it's like a drop in
Well,
the
and
bucket.
here's the interesting of that about this, Donna. Now to get on my not my political soapbox, but right, we have if we take a look globally, like what we're giving to Ukraine, right, and we're giving
Mhm.
overseas, what we give to the narcotic issue, like all in child exploitation is 200 million. So I'll give you a number. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which has 61 task forces throughout the United States, 61 last year got $31.9 million. It's about 550 grand per task force to fight this. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in one of the bills is actually keep it up with inflation. And I'm told that we won't pass anything that has any more dollars to it.
Mhm.
You're talking about rounding errors. Um, I sat at a meeting with some appropriations people, and to the left of me, I had one defense contractor. To the right, I had a defense contractor, and they're talking about billion-dollar missile systems and trillion
Right.
dollars here.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what I can do with just one of those systems? And they're like, what? I can make more impact and save more children and give more support on the front line with just one of them. And it's a priority. And until we prioritize our children politically, legislatively, and really actually come out and do that, it's not going to change.
I'm totally with you, and you're talking my language right now. When you've been doing this as long as we both have, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Children's lives are being destroyed generation after generation, right? 30 years into this, both of us. So, and when you look at the fact, you can probably give me better numbers than what I have, but the child porn industry is multi-billions and billions and billions of dollars. One porn site, just with hardcore adult graphic porn depicting child rape and that kind of thing, is just $3 billion. Pornhub. You look at the trafficking industry, multi-billions and billions and billions of dollars. These are criminal enterprises. And you just talked about the peanuts, the little million here, being farmed out to prosecute these cases. And the way I did a TED talk on this once. And I said, it's like trying to put out a forest fire with a squirt gun. We're not going to win, and the fire's going to keep burning.
Well, here's a perfect example. Project Safe Childhood, which actually does the prosecution angle of child
Hmm.
exploitation cases, also provides training mechanisms because it has a funding number attached, and that number will not pass the Republican House because it has money attached to it. So that is what I'm actually talking about. Like some people fundamentally, oh, it means $1 there, we can't go against it. But that is the challenge that we're running into. And look, the reality is what we spend and part of the problem. And I'll give you even this for instance. So we spend a lot of money on trafficking more than exploitation. Exploitation is
Yes.
even more of a problem than trafficking. We spend money on fentanyl. Now, I am not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a doctor, but from a common sense standpoint, if we can reduce victimization of children, don't we stand to have less children being trafficked and
Hmm.
being using
Drugs.
illicit drugs,
Hmm.
right? So isn't that quality of life? And if you're abused as a child, studies show there's no difference between you being abused, um, sexually abused, and then being abused online. It's the same thing. What happens from a victim standpoint. So what
Right.
about the quality of life? How many people are the United States losing that could be doctors, could be presidents, could be politicians that can change something that have been victimized here? So it's a quality of life aspect too.
Well, you're so right. And this is leading perfectly into the Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge. Enough is Enough, of which I'm the CEO. We put out the first Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge in 2016. We sent it to candidate Donald Trump, candidate Secretary Clinton. Trump signed it. Clinton sent us a letter of support. And the whole purpose of that, and by the way, we just redid it. We've got the 2024 presidential pledge. It's been sent to candidate Trump and it's been sent to Vice President Harris. People may say, Why are you doing this? Well, the pledge tenants, what we're asking them to do is a number of things. And we've got over 60-something organizations that have signed on, including yours, Raven, joining us, calling on the next president or the candidate, if elected, to do a number of things. And one is to aggressively enforce and fund the current laws. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You've got to fund this and you've got to treat it like the war that it is. Another thing that we've called for in this is dealing with AI. And one of the stats in here was recently attorneys general in 54 states called for a commission to study the impacts of AI on child exploitation with concern through location tracking, voice mimicking, deep fake images, and of course, C-SPAN. And in the pledge, we actually ask the next president to deter and address child exploitation by expanding existing restrictions on CSAM to explicitly cover AI-generated CSAM. There's a lot more they can do, but that's in there. Yeah.
By the way, we Raven did. We actually worked on the language to create, which was introduced by Representative Langworthy, an actual commission. From that bill aspect. But again, even if you had a commission, and here's the problem, the challenges with commissions. Okay, and you got to get people together. You actually have to do some work to do something. Right. So, but it's too late. And I think this is the point, and this is what I want everyone to understand, is exigency. No one has exigency, right? And rightfully so. It's not just children that we have to deal with as a nation. I understand that we have natural disasters, we have wars, and we have other things. But ultimately, when is the time that our children are going to be given that sort of attention, right? We haven't done that, as a country and as a nation. And I think that's where, I call on Democrats, independents, Republicans, it doesn't matter, again, how we were talking about where you come from. But the reality is, every one of us have children, and every one of us children's are impacted.
And don't you also think, and this is something Michael Reagan and I talked about on the last podcast, and he said, when a politician or a president or someone who's running an agency, when it's their child who's sexually exploited, when it's their child who's sex extorted, when it's their child who takes their life because of this kind of thing happening, when it's their child who has AI-generated images of them out there all over the internet, something may start to happen. And what I found, John, and this is even in talking to parents about protecting their own kids, that there's just this mindset that this isn't going to happen to my child. My child is somehow immune. And there is no child that is immune from any of this, correct?
Correct. It's not if, it's when.
Exactly.
You know what? The odds are like even the Butner study where I was telling you about the 50 to 85% hands-on offenders. I've never had someone where it's just one victim. It's always multiple victims, right? I remember I said this quote to the New York Times, and I tried to backtrack until they actually did it, because I said, there's 9 million people. I said, we can arrest 400,000 people in the state of New Jersey. And then, it's 3 to 5% of the population. So one of the studies have, from that are pedophiles, right? Right. Now that could be extremely high, but the reality is that there are offenders out there. It's not a question if, it's a question when. Your child, I'm 100% with certainty at some point will be groomed or attempted to be groomed. It's whether or not they go through it. It's a whole nother story.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So we're gonna get to how do we actually protect our kids, and what do parents need to know. And one of the things that you and I have talked about is kids need to themselves recognize the red flags and begin to understand the tactics of a predator, of an online groomer. And by the way, everyone, a groomer can be an actual pedophile, someone who's going to sexually abuse that child themselves, get them in private conversations, take them into an encrypted area and groom them online. But it may be also a trafficker who is then going to get that child in a compromising situation and then sell that child to someone who wants to sexually abuse that child. So do these conversations need to look like with our children?
Here, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit on the AI piece. So from a grooming perspective, and this is what a lot of people don't talk about. Everyone thinks it's the Amazon gift cards or the like, but the reality is that now an offender, when they groom, they what do we like to talk about? Ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So the language is a really important aspect and this is what people need to understand, and parents, because when you see someone talking to them and you see the same words being used back at them, it could be like, I like Taylor Swift. Oh, you like Taylor Swift? My favorite song's 1989. No way, my favorite song's 1989. I'm curious. These are things that get into someone's subconscious and they don't even realize it, right? So AI, now I can machine learn your children's profiles. I can machine learn everything that they say and do. And now I can employ a program basically to mimic that. And they're not going to be able to understand that. So from that AI version, parents need to actually teach children on what an offender would actually do. And, we did, I don't know how many internet safeties that I've done in my lifetime, but the reality is it's not at high school, it's not at middle school. We need to start that curriculum um, at a younger age. And I know our
Agreed.
thought is to protect our children from all this. I'm of the opinion now, and it's changed, is that we have to teach our children what offenders are going to do and what the horrors and dangers are, because we're not protecting them if we don't give them that information so they can at least understand that. So we need to empower them as well.
So if you're a parent listening, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of parents listening, how would you have that parent, what would you recommend that parent start to say and teach that child? First of all, the parent themselves need to understand how a predator grooms, right?
Yeah,
Whether
yeah.
AI is involved or not.
Parents don't understand. And I think that's part of the problem. They see someone talking to someone in Roblox or a game. What happens is, think about it this way, and this is how I really term internet safety. If there was a storm, right, like we just had Milton, when there's a storm, people are worried about it. If there's an earthquake, people hide underneath a table, because what happens in our brain, the amygdala puts off fear, like, oh, we're in trouble, we need to do something. Problem is, for parents and children, if I'm sitting in my house and my
Mhm.
children are on my phone and I'm on my device, there is no danger. Without any danger, your brain doesn't activate you, and then you don't mistrust whatever's happening. Because of that, people trust more. They don't see the danger, and that's
Right.
how they get manipulated. So parents need to understand that, but they all need to understand, not just from the grooming perspective, but they have to have those conversations with their children. Hey, someone's going to talk to you, and they're going to talk to you, and they're going to repeat the same language and words. First of all, do not continue with that you don't know. Ask questions, for example, if you get friended to someone, to make sure that that person is that person, because now people could create new accounts in order to mimic that someone, in order to get someone on there.
That's right. And again, whether it's AI or not, one of the piece of advice that we give to parents is to teach your children that they cannot recognize a disguised predator. A predator can pretend to be anyone, whether it's a predator using AI, and using AI to then scale how many kids he's talking to, because now you can talk to a lot more than you used to could if you were having to groom each one yourself. But the point that parents need to say to kids is, you cannot detect a disguised predator. They can be anybody. They can use somebody else's picture. They can say they are whatever age they are. They will pretend to like the same sports you do. This is how they will attempt to manipulate you. They can get into your gaming platform and start playing games with you and befriend you that way. They can pretend like they love soccer like you do on social media and befriend you that way. If they know that you like 14-year-old blonde surfer dudes, they can pretend to be a 14, 13-year-old blonde surfer dude and send you a picture that's not even them. So one of the key things I think is important is, if you don't know that person in real life, be suspect, because they may not be who they say they are, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of times they're not. I mean, that's what, and now it's just so easy to take over someone or create a new account in order to do that. And here's the other thing is that a lot of images and pictures today is public. I mean, I can go to a kid's school website. I can go to their soccer base. So when parents actually should not opt in to let organizations use their photos like their school, because guess what? On the soccer team, when their photos are up there, that's child's pictures up there. The dance
That's right.
competition, the karate, like there's so many public images, but we just think we opt in because it's the school, and it's not the school's fault. But when they post that image publicly, it's out there.
And let's just talk about parents and grandparents posting pictures of their kids and kids posting pictures of themselves. What we used to say is don't post as a parent, as a grandparent, or a kid yourself, personally identifying information or a picture that has personally identifying information, like your school uniform standing in front of the name of your school, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's not even safe because
No.
now that image can be used in AI to sextort that child, to create child pornography, to do anything with, correct? I mean, is
Yeah.
anybody's images or videos really safe anymore?
No, not anymore. You know, my poor sister, because this is before AI, when she would post something, her kids, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what? It was just I'm sorry. You know what? You do this long enough, you see the bad in things, and you hate to take away that innocence. And my thing is that I'm trying to protect that innocence as long as possible. The last thing I want is a child to get victimized, because I've seen what it does to a child. I've seen the ripple effect. So when a child gets abused, online, it's not just the child. It's the law enforcement officer that tries to help them. It's the parent that it's the advocacy center. That ripple expands so big, and that one abuse impacts so many people, and haven't seen that. What we're trying to do is prevent and help that from not happening, because there's such an ecosystem of all the individuals that does impact when a child does get abused.
Yeah, and it obviously can ruin a life. You never recover
No.
from abuse, and you never recover from any type of sexual abuse or abuse anyway. But then once that material is captured in child sex abuse material, or even in the case of AI generated, then it's out there forever.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
go
and for
ahead.
parents, like the adverse childhood experiences, like ACEs, what happens to a child impacts them so much later in life. And I think that's what parents need to understand, because what happens here is going to impact your child's life so significantly down, where most of them won't recover from it. So to your point, Donna, is I think that's where parents, again, it's hard to remain vigilant. We become
Yeah.
complacent. Life gets in the way, and it's understandable. But we have to have those conversations. We have to have those laws that support it. We have to have that curriculum in schools. I mean, the minute we lose that vigilance is the minute we lose the ability to protect our children.
Yeah, you're totally right. And it's scary. And as we're thinking about, no picture or video is really safe. But how you put that genie back in the bottle? Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine right now a mom hearing this is going, "Oh my goodness! Now I got to tell my 13-year-old who I'm now just allowed to use Instagram or whatever, no pictures." Well, that's the whole point of Instagram.
Yeah.
How are we going to win this battle here?
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing you have to do is look, the privacy settings. One thing that parents
Hmm.
don't understand too is every update, you have to go back in and
Yeah.
then re-put in your privacy settings, because it defaults it to no privacy. So
Hmm.
everything it does, whether it's ads, it defaults back. So you have to actually go back in there. And again, Instagram, the whole point of being Instagram, right? Everyone's an influencer. So I leave my stuff open so many people see it, so I can get likes. Not only that,
Hmm.
I can now monetize things. So
Right.
children today, they want to be an influencer because this is how they see how they're going to make
Their
money.
value. Yeah, their
Yeah.
value. Right.
So it's hard. And how do you tell a child when like everyone else is doing it? So like I ran into the issue when my son was younger, and I'm like, I can't prevent him from playing games online because that's where all his friends are, right? So then I just have to educate him better.
And yeah, and I want to kind of drill down now into some of the basic safety rules and software tools. We call these rules and tools that enough is enough. And by the way, anyone listening, please go to internetsafety101.org. We have got information on how to protect your kids from everything from bullying to pornography to sextortion, CSAM, child exploitation, etc. But rules are parents. These are the things you as a parent need to do. Have regular conversations with your kids, right? Know what they're doing online and who they're talking to, and be the parent, the safe parent that they will come to and share any experience with, and let them know you're not going to shame them. You're not going to blame them, but you want them to come to you because stuff is happening really fast and lightning speed, right, John?
Yeah, victim blaming. You hit it right there. Look, your child, what you want to foster is an open communication. And it's very easy for us to get angry and upset that they went and posted something. It's not their fault. If you're a parent, it's not their fault. There's people that are trying to victimize them. So keep that in mind as a parent. The last thing you want to do is blame a child. You want them to foster that open conversation.
Right. And you want to be the safe person. You have to be in order to protect them and to be the first line of defense. Now, on the tools, you were just talking about privacy tools. What we recommend, John, and to every parent listening, you have to use the parental control tools on the social media sites, on the gaming platforms, on your phone. What are the three biggies? For me, filtering. Turn the filters on. Now, and I'm going to ask you about, well, we probably don't have time, but filters, and tell me if I'm wrong, should work on AI generated pornography or CSAM or real content, right? So filters are going to help protect some of this. Let me just get through the next two. Monitoring technology. This will show you as the parent who your kids are talking to and where they're trying to get to. Let your kids know you're turning these things on. And time monitoring tools. These are so important. John, we've got about a minute and a half left. Can you let us know how people can find you and a last word?
Yep, sure. www.raven.us. My email is jp@raven.us. And the only last word is vigilance, right? We have to remain vigilant. We have to take a look at technology. A lot of people, what we don't understand, we stay away from. The more we can have those conversations, at least the basic ones, the more likely we are to help.
And I'm going to also wrap with this. I'm a big proponent of wait until your kid is at least in the 8th grade before you give them an internet-enabled device, and especially a smartphone, because it's all open, all the defaults are open, and you, the parent, you've got to use all these tools we're talking about on every single device, on every single platform, and on everything. So it's a lot to be a good cyber parent. So please consider when you actually let your kids go online. And if they have to do this for homework when they're younger, okay, that's fine. But just understand that you're opening up the wonderful world of the internet, but also all of the danger, and it's very real, and your child is not immune. So John, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Donna.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Please share this podcast. Please go to our internetsafety101.org site. Sign up for our free newsletter. We're keeping you updated all of the time on these issues. And until next time, we just encourage you to live by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and encourage your kids to do the same. Until next time, thank you, and God bless y'all.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.